Gamer bros harassed me at a tournament. They didn't know I was their reigning champ. For 3 years, I had been competing under the online handle Void Killer. No one knew that the mysterious winner of 5 major championships was actually a 19-year-old girl named Maya. The moment I walked into the venue, a bunch of guys hanging around the registration desk started snickering. The tallest one, wearing a jersey with the name Derek on the back, asked if I was lost and suggested the anime convention was in the next building. His buddy Leo chimed in, wondering if my boyfriend was playing, and offered to point me toward the area where girlfriends usually waited. When I explained I was there to sign up for the tournament, Derek spat out his energy drink in disbelief. He made a sarcastic comment about me thinking I could compete with serious players just because I might have beaten my little brother at a party game once. Leo snatched my registration paper and read my name out loud in a mocking, high-pitched voice. Derek joked that I probably used a controller with cute, pink buttons. Then Derek grabbed my wrist and forcibly bent my fingers into what he called a claw grip, the proper way for real gamers to hold a mouse. He squeezed down until my knuckles popped painfully. Leo dumped my equipment bag onto the table, picked up my custom gaming mouse, and laughed, claiming it was probably loaded with cheat macros because girls supposedly always needed an unfair advantage. When I correctly answered every single one of their trash talk quiz questions about pro gaming, Leo accused me of looking up answers on my phone and demanded to see it. Derek started scrolling through my photos, making crude comments about what he thought he saw. Finally, Derek noticed my official competitor badge. His face flushed bright red. He held it up for everyone to see and started shouting that affirmative action and diversity rules were ruining competitive gaming. He backed me up against the registration table and clamped his hand over my mouth when I tried to say anything. He pressed so hard that I could taste blood from my lip getting cut against my teeth. Leo grabbed my mouse and stomped on its cable until it sparked and broke. Derek leaned in close and whispered a threat about how, after he was finished with me, he would find every other girl at the event and make sure they knew what happened to females who tried to invade male spaces. Right then, the tournament organizer called for our specific pool of players to head to the main stage. My hands were shaking uncontrollably, so I jammed them deep into my pockets. Here I was, after 3 years of dominating online competitions, and these guys had instantly reduced me to that scared 12-year-old kid who first got told she didn't belong in a voice chat lobby. I found my assigned computer and sat down. The screen automatically logged into my profile, Void Killer. Derek was sitting just 2 seats away. I saw him glance at my screen, then do a double take. He looked at my face, then back at the screen. His jaw literally dropped. He whispered, "No way." The commentator's voice boomed over the speakers, announcing a special treat for the audience. The 5-time champion Void Killer was competing in person for the first time ever. The crowd erupted. People stood up, craning their necks to see who was at my station. Derek's face went completely pale. Leo and his other friend Marcus were whispering frantically back and forth. The first match was scheduled, Derek versus me. He was shaking so badly he could barely click his mouse. I completely destroyed him in 4 minutes, which turned out to be the shortest match in that tournament bracket's history. The crowd went absolutely wild. Leo lasted 6 minutes. Marcus lasted 5. After each victory, I stood up, looked each of them directly in the eye, and said absolutely nothing. I just let them sit there with the humiliation. By the time the finals rolled around, the whole story of their harassment at registration had spread through the entire venue. Someone had filmed Derek destroying my mouse. Another person caught the moment he covered my mouth. During the semifinal break, the tournament organizers pulled all 3 of them aside. When they came back, their faces were ashen gray. I went on to win the whole tournament, securing my 6th championship. When I lifted the trophy, the crowd chanted Void Killer so loudly the walls seemed to shake. The post-match interview, where I told the host every single detail of what Derek and his friends had done, went viral within hours. Gaming news sites picked it up first, then mainstream media. Derek's own team dropped him before the sun even set that day. Leo lost his streaming partnership. Marcus's sponsorship deals vanished overnight. 3 weeks later, the tournament organization issued a lifetime ban for all 3 of them. No appeals ever. Derek tried to post a public apology video, saying he had made mistakes and was working on himself, but the comments section was disabled within an hour. After that, my inbox flooded with messages from hundreds of girls. Girls who had quit competitive gaming because of guys like Derek. Girls who had never even entered a tournament because they were terrified of exactly what happened to me. That's when I started a mentorship program, pairing up experienced female players with newcomers, giving them someone to sit with at events, someone who had already faced the Dereks of the world and won. Last month, one of my mentees won her first regional tournament. She's 15 years old and her gamer tag is Maya's mouse because she uses the same mouse model I do. After her win, some guy in the crowd yelled that she probably cheated. She just grabbed the microphone and said, "My mentor is Void Killer. You want to say that again?" The whole room went silent, and then the crowd started laughing at him. That's the thing about spaces people tell you that you don't belong in. You don't just take them for yourself. You hold them wide open for everyone who comes after you. Derek streams to maybe 40 viewers now, mostly bots. Sometimes I check in just to watch his numbers. Maybe it's petty, but I honestly feel like I earned that small satisfaction. A few days later, I opened Derek's stream and watched the viewer count hover at 32. Half the chat was just bots spamming crypto scam links. The other half was maybe 3 actual people asking when he'd play his main game again. He can't, the bans make sure of that. I watched for 5 minutes, then closed the tab. That feeling of satisfaction hits differently every single time I check. My email inbox just won't stop filling up. Every time I clear out 20 messages, 30 more pop up in their place. Girls share stories about guys who grabbed their controllers at local events. girls who got followed to their cars after tournaments, girls who stopped competing entirely because some guy told them they only won because their opponent went easy on them. I read every single message. I respond when I can, usually late at night when I really should be sleeping. Each story makes me angrier about how normal everyone treated this stuff for so long, like it was just some unavoidable part of gaming culture instead of straight-up harassment that should have got people banned years ago. About 3 weeks after the tournament, I got an email from Nora, one of the main event organizers, the woman who actually runs registration and deals with competitor issues. Her email was short and direct. She wanted to know if I would help develop a real anti-harassment protocol for future events. Actual policies with teeth, not just some code of conduct buried on page 7 of a rulebook that nobody ever enforces. I wrote back within an hour, yes, absolutely yes, because words on paper mean nothing without someone who actually lived through it helping to write them. We spent 3 weeks on video calls drafting those policies. Nora brought in 2 other organizers and a lawyer who specialized in event safety. I told them everything that happened at that registration table, the wrist grabbing, the destroyed equipment, Derek's hand over my mouth. I made them understand that harassment doesn't just magically appear during matches. It starts the second women walk through the door. The policies we wrote covered everything. Mandatory harassment training for all competitors before they could even register. Immediate removal for any kind of physical intimidation. Lifetime bans for documented patterns of abuse. The policies protected competitors from the moment they walked in for registration all the way through post-event interactions, including online harassment afterward. Nora pushed to include a reporting system where witnesses could submit evidence anonymously. The lawyer made sure everything was legally enforceable and wouldn't get the organization sued. The first tournament using our new protocols happened 2 months later. I registered both as a competitor and as an observer. Nora wanted me there to see how enforcement actually worked in real time. I arrived early and watched the registration area from across the hall. A guy in a green jersey walked up to the table where a girl was filling out her forms. He leaned over her shoulder and said something about her appearance. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw her shoulders tense up. Security was there in under 2 minutes. 2 staff members in bright yellow vests pulled the guy aside before he could say anything else. I watched them talk to him near the wall. They were calm but firm. One of them pulled out a printed sheet and pointed to specific sections while explaining the new policies. The guy's face went from confused to shocked to bright red. They gave him a formal warning that went straight into his competitor file. 3 strikes and he'd be banned for life. He looked completely stunned that anyone would actually care about a comment like that. That told me everything about how things used to be. How many girls had heard worse and nobody did anything because that was just how tournaments were. The girl he targeted finished her registration and walked toward the practice area. She stopped when she saw me. She knew who I was. Everyone here knew who I was after that viral interview. She approached slowly like she wasn't sure if I wanted to be bothered. She thanked me by name, said she almost didn't register for this tournament because she was scared of exactly what just got prevented. Her voice shook when she talked about watching my interview and deciding to try competing in person for the first time. That conversation stayed with me for days. I kept thinking about how close she came to not showing up. How many others made that same choice and just stayed home? I competed in that tournament and won my 7th championship. During the post-match interview, the host asked about the new harassment policies. I dedicated the win to every girl who ever quit gaming because someone made them feel unwelcome. The crowd reaction was even louder than for my 6th win. People were standing up and chanting. Some of them held up signs with messages supporting the new policies. The energy in that room felt completely different from any tournament I had ever competed in before. A week later, a gaming journalist named Clara contacted me. She had been covering esports for 5 years. Her email explained that she wanted to interview me for a longer feature about women in competitive gaming. Not just my personal story, but the bigger picture of what was changing in the scene. I agreed because she promised to center other voices, not just my own. Too many articles about harassment focus only on the victim's story and ignore everyone else fighting the same battles. We met for the interview at a coffee shop near the tournament venue. Clara brought a recorder and a notebook filled with questions. She asked about the hundreds of messages I received after the viral interview. I told her each one represented someone who had been failed by the community, someone who faced harassment and got told it was just part of gaming, someone who reported abuse and watched organizers do nothing. Clara wrote everything down, then looked up and asked if I had thought about doing something more structured than individual responses, something that could help more people at once instead of one message at a time. I spent the next few days thinking about what she said. The question kept coming back to me while I was practicing, while I was reading messages, while I was trying to sleep. One by one just wasn't working anymore. My inbox had over 300 unread messages now, and that number grew every single day. I couldn't keep up with individual responses and still compete and still have any kind of normal life. The mentorship program idea started taking shape in my head, but I didn't know what it would actually look like. I just knew something had to change because what I was doing now wasn't enough. I emailed Nora and asked if we could talk about something bigger than just the harassment policies. She responded within an hour asking when I was free. We met at the same coffee shop where I did the interview with Clara. Nora brought her laptop and a notebook and looked genuinely excited when I explained the concept, pairing experienced female players with newcomers who needed support and guidance, giving them someone to sit with at tournaments so they didn't walk into registration alone like I did. She loved it immediately and started taking notes before I even finished explaining. She told me the tournament organization had resources they could dedicate to this. Meeting space, promotional support, maybe even some funding for equipment if mentees needed it. We spent 2 hours mapping out the basic structure, and by the end of that meeting, I felt like this might actually work. Next 3 weeks were all about building the application system. Nora handled the technical side while I focused on what questions we needed to ask. Mentees would describe their experience level, what games they played, what kind of support they were looking for, whether they needed help with strategy, with handling tournament pressure, with just having someone there who understood. Mentors would specify what they could offer based on their own experience and availability. The whole point was making matches that actually meant something instead of just randomly pairing people up and hoping it worked. We launched the application process and I posted about it on my social media. Within 24 hours, we had 47 mentee applications and 12 mentor applications. The mentee numbers didn't surprise me, but I was worried we wouldn't get enough experienced players willing to mentor. 12 was a solid start, though. I read through every single mentee application personally. Some of them were heartbreaking. Girls who quit competing after harassment. Girls who never started because they were too scared. Girls who played online but couldn't imagine walking into a tournament venue alone. One application was from a 17-year-old named Haley, who described herself as skilled enough to compete but terrified of attending events without support. She had been playing for 4 years, had strong mechanics, knew the game inside and out, but she had never been to a single local event because the idea of walking in alone made her physically sick. I accepted her as one of my personal mentees immediately. We started video chatting twice a week to practice together. She was even better than her application suggested. Her game sense was incredible and her execution was clean. The only thing holding her back was fear, and I knew exactly how that felt. I promised her I would sit with her at her first tournament, and I meant it. I was not letting her walk into that venue the way I walked into mine. The other mentors started connecting with their mentees, and Nora set up monthly check-ins to make sure the matches were working. Most of them were going really well. A few pairs realized they weren't compatible, and we rematched them with other people. That flexibility was important because forcing connections that don't work helps nobody. 2 months after we launched the program, Haley told me she was ready to register for a tournament. It was a smaller regional event, not one of the major circuits, but it was still a huge step for her. I cleared my schedule to be there. Registration day arrived and I met Haley outside the venue. She was shaking so badly she dropped her equipment bag twice before we even got to the door. I picked it up for her and carried it inside. At the registration table, she could barely hold the pen to fill out her forms. Her hands were trembling and she kept apologizing. I told her there was nothing to apologize for and helped her complete the paperwork. I stayed right next to her through the entire process, making it completely clear she was not alone. Other competitors glanced at us and I saw recognition in some of their faces. They knew who I was. Nobody said anything inappropriate. The tournament started and Haley won her first match, then her second, then her third. She made it all the way to semifinals before losing to a player who had been competing for 5 years. After the match, she was practically glowing despite the loss. She told me that just participating without anyone making her feel unwelcome was worth more than any trophy. That feeling of safety and belonging mattered more than the competitive results. I understood exactly what she meant. 3 months after launching the program, we had 15 active mentor-mentee pairs, and Nora suggested we create a private Discord server for everyone. The community aspect became just as valuable as the individual mentoring relationships. People shared strategies, discussed tournaments, vented about bad experiences, celebrated victories. It was the support network I wish had existed when I started competing. I kept entering tournaments myself because staying visible mattered. 4 months after everything with Derek, I won my 8th championship. Standing on that stage holding the trophy felt different now. I was not just winning for myself anymore. Every victory proved that speaking up did not end my career. Every championship showed that you can call out harassment and still succeed. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy, but I would not trade it for anything. A new application came in from a 14-year-old named Bait. Her essay talked about watching my viral interview and deciding she wanted to compete despite being scared. She described years of playing online while hiding her identity, avoiding voice chat, never revealing she was a girl. She said seeing me win after everything that happened made her believe maybe she could compete too. I accepted her application before I even finished reading it. This was exactly why I started the program. Bait reminded me so much of myself at that age, it was almost strange. The same aggressive play style, the same fear of being visible, the same hunger to compete mixed with terror of what might happen if she showed up in person. She was naturally talented in ways that could not be taught, but she had never played at a local event, never sat at a tournament station, never felt the pressure of competing with people watching. We started working together and I could see her potential immediately. She just needed someone to help her believe she belonged there. We started meeting twice a week over video calls, and I walked her through everything I knew about competitive play. The first few sessions focused on mechanics and strategy, but I quickly realized she needed more than that. I taught her breathing exercises for when the pressure built during matches. I showed her how to recognize when someone was trying to get in her head and how to block it out. I explained the mental tricks I used when my hands started shaking or my heart raced too fast. She practiced on stream while I watched and gave feedback in real time. After each session, I sent her notes about what worked and what needed adjustment. The improvement happened fast because she was naturally talented and willing to put in the work. 4 weeks in, she asked me the question I had been waiting for. She wanted to know if people would treat her the way Derek treated me. I paused the recording and thought about how to answer honestly without scaring her off. I told her some people might try, but the environment had changed since my incident. Tournament organizers actually enforced harassment policies now. Other players were more likely to speak up when they saw something wrong. The community was not perfect, but it was better than it was. I promised her I would be there at her first tournament, sitting in the audience where she could see me. She went quiet for a minute, then thanked me in a voice that sounded relieved. We kept practicing, and I watched her confidence grow with each session. She started playing more aggressively and taking risks that paid off. Her reaction time improved and her strategy got sharper. By the time her first tournament came around, she was ready, even if she did not fully believe it yet. The regional qualifier happened on a Saturday morning at a convention center 2 hours from my apartment. I drove there early and found a seat in the audience section with a clear view of the competitor stations. I wore my Void Killer jersey so she could spot me easily when she looked up. The venue filled up fast, and I watched players register at the same tables where Derek cornered me 8 months ago. Everything looked different now. Security walked the floor checking badges. Staff members wore shirts that said, "Ask me about our harassment policy," in bright letters. The atmosphere felt safer, even though I knew one tournament does not fix everything. Bate arrived looking nervous, and I caught her eye from across the room. She gave me a small wave, and I saw her shoulders relax slightly. She registered without incident and headed to her assigned station. The first match started, and she won cleanly against an opponent who clearly underestimated her. The second match took longer, but she adapted her strategy mid-game and pulled out a victory. By the third match, other people in the audience were starting to notice her aggressive play style. She was playing exactly like I taught her, with the same calculated risks and fast decision-making. I watched her destroy her third opponent and felt this surge of pride that caught me off guard. This was what the mentorship program was supposed to create. Her fourth match put her against a guy who had been competing for 3 years. The match started well and she took an early lead. Then I heard him muttering something I could not make out from the audience. Bate's shoulders tensed and her gameplay hesitated for just a second. I leaned forward in my seat, willing her to look up. She glanced toward the audience and our eyes met. I nodded once and she took a visible breath, then she destroyed him. Not just one, but completely dominated in a way that left no room for doubt about her skill. The guy's face went red, and he shoved back from his station when the match ended. Bate stood up and walked past him without saying a word. I saw her fighting back a smile as she headed to the waiting area. During the break between rounds, she found me in the crowd. She told me that moment when she looked up and saw me there changed everything. She said it felt like taking back power she did not even know she had lost. The words hit me hard because I remembered that exact feeling. The tournament continued and Bate kept winning. She made it through the semifinals and into the finals against a player who was ranked in the top 50 regionally. The final match was close and the crowd got loud. I was on my feet with everyone else watching her execute strategies we practiced together. She won the deciding round, and the announcer called her name as the tournament champion. Bate stood up from her station and pointed directly at me in the audience before accepting her trophy. I am not ashamed to admit I cried a little. Watching her hold that trophy felt more important than any of my own championships. This is what happens when someone gets the support I never had starting out. The local gaming news covered her win that afternoon. The article mentioned she was part of my mentorship program and included quotes from her post-match interview about having support from experienced players. Within hours, my inbox filled with new applications from girls who wanted the same kind of mentoring. The program email got so many messages that Nora had to help me sort through them. We spent the next week reviewing applications and realized we needed to expand significantly to accommodate everyone. The demand was way bigger than either of us expected. Nora started reaching out to other experienced female players asking if they would be willing to mentor. She got responses from pros I had competed against and respected community members who wanted to help. Within 3 weeks, we grew from 15 mentor pairs to 40, spanning different games and skill levels. The program became something bigger than I ever imagined when I first started answering messages from girls who had been harassed. I checked Derek's stream one night out of habit. His viewer count sat at 28 and half of them had bought names. He was playing a completely different game because the permanent bans kept him out of his original specialty. He could not enter any sanctioned tournaments or partner with legitimate organizations. The bans were thorough and permanent across every major gaming platform. I watched for a few minutes and noticed how his commentary sounded defeated. He was not the same loud, aggressive person who cornered me at registration. The consequences broke something in him that would not come back. I closed the stream feeling that familiar satisfaction. Some people call it petty, but I earned the right to watch his career stay dead. Leo showed up on gaming forums every few weeks under different usernames trying to participate in strategy discussions or tournament predictions. Someone always recognized his writing style or caught him referencing details only he would know from his banned accounts. The callouts happened fast and public. Forum moderators deleted his posts and banned the new accounts within hours of someone identifying him. I watched it happen on 3 different forums over 2 months, and the pattern never changed. He tried to blend in and contribute like nothing happened, but the community would not let him forget. Gaming forums kept detailed records of harassment incidents, and his name came up in every major discussion about tournament safety. Some people screenshot his attempts to rejoin and posted them with warnings about who he really was. The documented footage of him destroying my mouse got linked every single time. Marcus disappeared completely after losing his sponsorships. His social media accounts went dark the same week the bans were announced. I heard through other competitors that he took a job doing IT support at some regular company nowhere near the gaming industry. No streams, no tournament appearances, no presence in any gaming spaces online or in person. Few people who knew him before said he tried explaining what happened as a misunderstanding, but the video evidence made that impossible. The footage showed exactly what he did, and there was no way to spin it differently. His career ended and he had to start over in a completely different field. Some consequences stick forever and close doors that never open again. Meanwhile, Haley won her first major tournament 8 months after joining the Mentorship program. I was watching the stream when it happened, and the victory felt almost as good as my own championships. She beat a player who had been competing professionally for 3 years, and the final match was not even close. Haley executed everything we practiced together with perfect timing and confidence. The post-match interview showed her talking about the mentorship program and crediting the support system for helping her compete without fear. 2 other mentees placed in the top 10 at different regional events that same month. Another girl from the program made semifinals at a qualifier tournament and got noticed by professional team scouts. The success stories started piling up faster than I could track them all. Every victory proved the program worked and created space for more girls to compete. Nora sent me updates about new applications coming in after each mentee won something. The momentum built on itself as more people saw that female competitors could succeed when they had proper support. A woman named Lynette contacted me through email asking if I would be interested in speaking on a panel at a major gaming convention about building inclusive competitive spaces. She worked in esports event management and saw the coverage of my story plus the mentorship program's growth. The convention was one of the biggest annual gaming events with tens of thousands of attendees and streaming coverage that reached millions. She wanted me to share my experience and talk about practical changes that actually worked beyond just posting statements on social media. This story is also available as a podcast on Spotify. You can find the link in the description or comments. I agreed immediately because visibility matters more than comfort. The more people who heard directly from someone who faced harassment and fought back, the harder it became to pretend the problem did not exist. I had never done public speaking like this before, but the opportunity to reach that many people at once was too important to pass up. The panel happened 3 months later in a massive convention hall with every seat filled and people standing along the back wall. I shared the stage with 4 other female pros and 2 advocates who worked on harassment prevention in gaming spaces. The moderator asked each of us to talk about our experiences and what actual change looked like instead of empty corporate promises. I told my story starting with Derek at registration and ending with the mentorship program's current success. I did not soften any details about the harassment or how the gaming community initially failed to protect competitors. The audience stayed completely silent while I talked, and I could see people in the front rows taking notes. When I finished describing how the permanent bans and new protocols made a measurable difference, the applause was loud enough that the moderator had to wait. The other panelists shared similar stories about harassment and the institutional failures that enabled it for years. We talked honestly about how most gaming organizations only started caring after viral incidents forced their hand. The discussion covered everything from registration safety to social media harassment to the casual sexism that still existed in gaming culture. Nobody held back or tried to make it comfortable for people who did not want to hear it. During the question and answer section, a girl who looked maybe 12 or 13 raised her hand and asked how to deal with being scared to compete in person. Her voice shook when she talked about wanting to enter tournaments but being terrified of getting treated the way I was. I leaned forward to the microphone and told her about the mentorship program. I explained how it worked and gave her the application website so she could find someone to support her at events. I mentioned that being scared was completely normal and did not mean she should not compete. The fear came from knowing the risks were real, but having support made those risks manageable. Other people in the audience pulled out their phones to write down the website, and at least 6 more people asked for the information again during the remaining question time. After the panel ended, I got surrounded by attendees wanting to talk more about the program or share their own harassment stories. I stood there for over an hour answering questions and listening to people describe experiences almost identical to mine. Every conversation reinforced why this work mattered beyond my own vindication. That convention appearance led to 3 more speaking invitations within 2 weeks. Other gaming events wanted me on panels or doing solo presentations about harassment prevention and mentorship programs. I realized I was becoming a spokesperson for something much bigger than my personal story. The role was exhausting because it meant constantly reliving the worst experience of my competitive career in front of audiences. Every panel required me to describe Derek's hand over my mouth and the blood I tasted and the fear I felt walking to that first match, but the impact made the exhaustion worthwhile. After each speaking event, the mentorship program got dozens of new applications, and other experienced players reached out offering to become mentors. The visibility created real growth and reached people who never would have found the program otherwise. I was tired, but I kept accepting invitations because turning them down meant missing opportunities to create change. I competed in my 9th championship tournament 6 months after starting the mentorship program and won against a field of over 200 competitors. The victory felt different from my earlier championships because now it meant something beyond personal achievement. When I lifted the trophy, the crowd chanted "Void Killer" like always, but this time I was thinking about Haley and Bate and all the other mentees who were watching. During the post-match interview, the host asked about balancing competitive gaming with running the mentorship program. I told him the mentees reminded me why winning mattered in the first place. Every championship I took proved that speaking up about harassment did not end my career the way Derek threatened it would. Every trophy showed younger players that they could compete and succeed and demand better treatment without sacrificing their place in gaming. The mentees had given me purpose beyond just being the best player. They had turned my competitive drive into something that helped other people instead of just feeding my own ego. Bate messaged me 2 weeks later asking if I would be at a major tournament coming up in 3 months. It was the same circuit where I won my first championship 4 years ago. She was applying to compete and wanted to know if I would be there to support her. I wrote back immediately that I would not miss it for anything. This tournament mattered more than most because it was her first major event, the kind with serious competition and professional scouts watching. Regional tournaments were important, but major circuit events were where careers got launched. I had been working with Bate for almost a year now, and watching her confidence grow from terrified newcomer to someone ready to compete at the highest levels. She was prepared for this and deserved the opportunity to prove herself on a big stage. The tournament venue was massive with hundreds of competitors registered and streaming coverage that would reach millions of viewers across multiple platforms. The main competition hall had stadium seating for spectators and professional broadcasting equipment everywhere. Bate was nervous when we met up before registration, but she was also prepared. We spent the last month practicing specifically for this tournament's format and competition level. I walked with her through registration to make sure nobody gave her problems and stayed nearby while she set up her equipment at the practice stations. I could see her hands shaking slightly, but she was holding it together. Before her first match, I reminded her that she belonged here just as much as anyone else competing. She earned her spot through skill, and nobody could take that away from her. I told her I would be in the audience watching every match and that she should look for me whenever she needed to remember she was not alone. She nodded and took a deep breath before heading to her assigned station. I found my seat in the spectator section where she could easily spot me and settled in to watch her compete at the highest level she had ever faced. Her first match started against someone ranked way below her skill level, but she played clean and focused anyway. I watched from my seat as she took control early and closed it out without any showboating. The second match was tougher, but she adapted to her opponent's style and won in straight rounds. Between matches, she glanced up at me in the audience and I gave her a small nod. The third match put her against a player I recognized from other tournaments, and she handled the pressure without falling apart. Nobody made comments about her gender or questioned whether she belonged there. The other competitors treated her like any other skilled player trying to advance through brackets. I noticed guys at nearby stations watching her matches with genuine interest in her gameplay instead of looking for reasons to dismiss her. The tournament staff interacted with her normally during equipment checks and match coordination. This was what I wanted when I started the mentorship program. Competitors judging each other purely on skill instead of assuming girls did not belong. The culture shift was not complete everywhere, but it was happening in spaces like this where consequences for harassment were real and enforced. Bate made it to semifinals, which blew my mind because this was her first major tournament, and she was already placing higher than players who had been competing for years. Her semifinal opponent had 5 years on the circuit and multiple top 10 finishes at events like this. I could see the experience gap in how he controlled the pace and read her patterns. She put up a real fight and took one round off him, but he closed it out in the end. When the match ended, she sat there for a second looking disappointed, but then she stood up and shook his hand properly. I met her outside the competition area after she collected her equipment. She told me she wished she had played better in those last 2 rounds. I reminded her that making semifinals at her first major was incredible, and most competitors would kill for that placement. She nodded, but I could tell she was already analyzing what she could have done differently. That competitive drive was exactly what would make her even better next time. The tournament organizers pulled her for a quick post-match interview because her run through brackets got attention from the streaming audience. She sat down in front of the camera, looking nervous at first, but then settled in when they started asking questions. The interviewer asked how she prepared for her first major, and she talked about the mentorship program and how having experienced players to practice with changed everything. She mentioned specific things I taught her about staying calm under pressure and not letting intimidation tactics throw off her game. The interviewer asked if she faced any harassment during the tournament, and she said everyone treated her with respect and judged her purely on her gameplay. She credited the new tournament policies and the cultural shift happening in competitive gaming. The interview ran about 8 minutes, and she came across as genuine and thoughtful instead of giving standard boring answers. The clip started spreading across gaming social media within hours. People shared her comments about the mentorship program and tagged our official accounts. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with players asking how to apply and experienced competitors offering to volunteer as mentors. Applications to the mentorship program absolutely exploded after Bates' interview went viral. We got triple our normal monthly applications in just 3 days. I was trying to process them all, but there was no way we could match everyone with the current number of mentors we had. Nora contacted me saying we needed to create a wait list because we were completely overwhelmed. She started reaching out to every experienced female player she knew, asking them to consider joining as mentors. Some said yes immediately after seeing Bates' interview. Others needed more information about time commitment and what mentoring actually involved. We put together better documentation about expectations and training resources for new mentors. Nora set up group video calls where current mentors could talk to potential new ones about their experiences. The recruiting push was intense but necessary because we could not leave hundreds of applicants hanging without support. I was competing in the same major tournament as Bate, and my matches were scheduled for the next day. Walking into the venue felt different now compared to my first in-person tournament years ago. Nobody questioned whether I belonged here or made comments about my gender. Other competitors nodded at me or said quick hellos between matches. Some newer players looked nervous around me, but that was about my skill level, not about being female. I moved through my early brackets without much trouble. The competition got harder in later rounds, but I had been doing this long enough that I knew how to adjust. My semifinal match went the distance and I barely pulled it out. The finals opponent was someone I had faced online before and we both knew each other's tendencies. The match was close, but I took it in the end, 10th championship. When they handed me the trophy, I felt this weird mix of pride and disbelief. I started competing anonymously because I was scared of exactly what happened at that first in-person tournament. Never imagined I would make it to double-digit championships. The victory was sweet and satisfying, but honestly, the mentorship work felt more meaningful now. Winning proved I was the best player, but helping others compete safely proved the community could actually change. During my championship interview, the host brought up the mentorship program and how much it had grown since I started it. I used the platform to emphasize that we desperately needed more experienced players to step up as mentors. Demand was massive and we could not meet it with our current volunteer base. I explained that mentoring did not require being a champion-level player, just someone with tournament experience who could guide newcomers through the process. The host asked what kind of time commitment it involved, and I broke down the typical schedule of video practice sessions and attending events together. I made it clear that we provided training and resources for new mentors, so they were not figuring it out alone. The interview reached a huge audience because championship matches got the most viewership. That same night, 3 professional players contacted me directly offering to join as mentors. They all mentioned seeing the interview and wanting to contribute to the cultural shift. One of them had been competing for 7 years and said she wished something like this existed when she started. Another was recently retired from competition, but still heavily involved in the scene. The third was currently active on a professional team and wanted to mentor during her off-season. Having pros volunteer brought serious credibility to the program and would attract even more experienced players. The program expanded rapidly over the next few months to 70 mentor-mentee pairs across 8 different competitive games. We were not just focused on my game anymore, but supporting female players across the entire gaming scene. Nora helped establish regional chapters so people could meet in person instead of only connecting online. The chapters organized local practice sessions and group attendance at smaller tournaments. This gave mentees the chance to compete with built-in support systems instead of showing up alone and scared. The organizational structure was becoming real and legitimate instead of just me answering messages and setting up video calls. We had coordinators for different regions and game categories. We created better tracking systems for mentor-mentee matches and progress reports. The whole thing was turning into an actual organization with reach and impact beyond what I imagined when I first started responding to those hundreds of messages. Haley got signed to a professional team, which was massive news because they were one of the biggest organizations in competitive gaming. She became one of their first female players in the team's entire history. Her signing announcement specifically credited the mentorship program for helping her develop the skills and confidence to compete at the professional level. The announcement got picked up by major gaming news sites and brought another wave of attention to what we were doing. Applications surged again and we had to expand our wait list. The professional team's social media posts about Haley joining got huge engagement with mostly positive responses. Sure, there were still some idiots in the comments making stupid jokes, but they got drowned out by genuine excitement. Other professional teams started paying attention and reaching out asking about our mentorship model. Some wanted to partner with us to develop their own female player pipelines. The whole ecosystem was shifting in ways that felt impossible years ago. 2 other major tournament organizations invited me to consult on their harassment policies. They wanted to implement the same standards we established after my incident with Derek. I brought the same uncompromising approach to their policy development. No more looking the other way when competitors harassed each other. No more treating abuse as normal trash talk that was just part of gaming culture. Mandatory reporting systems for harassment complaints. Immediate investigation procedures with clear timelines. Graduated consequences starting with warnings and escalating to permanent bans for serious violations. Both organizations adopted policies that were even stricter than what I initially proposed. They recognized that half measures did not work, and competitors needed to know that harassment had real consequences. The policies went into effect at their next major events, and competitors were required to acknowledge them during registration. Some players complained about political correctness ruining gaming, but they were the exact people these policies were designed to weed out. 10 months after her first major tournament, Bait competed in another one. I was in the audience again, watching her walk through registration with complete confidence. She was not the nervous kid who needed me to fill out her forms anymore. She moved through early brackets smoothly and efficiently. Her gameplay had evolved significantly since that first tournament. She had incorporated advanced techniques we practiced and developed her own style. The competition got tougher in later rounds, but she handled the pressure like someone who had been doing this for years instead of months. I watched her adapt to different opponent strategies and make smart adjustments between rounds. She made it all the way to the finals. The finals opponent was tough and experienced, but Bait played with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged on that stage. I was sitting in the audience watching her compete at the highest level with zero fear or hesitation. This was exactly what I wanted to create through the mentorship program. Not just helping girls win tournaments, but helping them compete with the absolute certainty that they deserve to be there. The finals match went to 5 games. Bate played with everything I taught her and everything she figured out on her own. Her opponent was 23 and had been competing professionally for 4 years. The crowd was split between them, chanting and cheering after every big play. Bate took the first game, lost the second and third, won the fourth to force the deciding match. I was gripping the armrests of my seat so hard my fingers hurt. The final game came down to one crucial moment. Bate had the advantage but made a risky play that did not work out. Her opponent capitalized immediately and closed out the match, second place. The crowd gave both players a standing ovation. Bate stood up from her station and shook her opponent's hand, then turned to look at me in the audience. She was smiling even though she lost. The post-match interview happened right there on stage. The host congratulated Bate on an incredible run and asked how it felt to place second at 15 years old. She talked about the competition being tough and her opponent playing better today. The coverage afterward focused entirely on her skill and potential. Gaming news sites ran headlines about the youngest finalist in tournament history. Nobody mentioned her gender as a qualifier or excuse. The articles analyzed her gameplay, her strategies, her future in competitive gaming. It felt like actual progress when skill got recognized as skill instead of being filtered through whether someone was a girl or guy. After the awards ceremony, people were filing out of the venue. Bate was talking to some other competitors near the stage. I was heading toward her when some guy in the crowd yelled out that she probably cheated. His voice carried across the whole space. Everyone nearby stopped and turned to look. Bate did not hesitate for even a second. She walked straight to where the microphone was still set up on stage, picked it up, and her voice came through the speakers. She asked if he wanted to say that again, then added that her mentor was Void Killer. The room went completely silent. You could hear someone breathing from across the venue. The guy who yelled was standing there frozen. Then someone in the crowd started laughing. Another person joined in. Within seconds, the entire room was laughing at him, not with him. He tried to say something, but nobody could hear it over the noise. He pushed through the crowd and left through the side exit. I watched him go and felt this deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with my own vindication. The community just defended Bate without me having to do anything. Other competitors were patting her on the back and congratulating her. Tournament staff were smiling. The whole atmosphere shifted in her favor because she stood up for herself and people backed her up instead of attacking her. That moment changed something for me. I had been thinking about this work as holding space open for other girls to compete safely, making sure they did not face what I faced. But watching Bate grab that microphone and challenge someone who tried to diminish her achievement, I realized she was not just occupying space I was holding open. She was claiming it as her own. She was making it hers. The next generation was not just benefiting from the battles I fought, they were fighting their own battles with confidence because they knew they had support. They were not scared and alone the way I was. That was what actually mattered. Not that I cleared the path, but that they were walking it without fear. 3 weeks later, the mentorship program hit its 1-year anniversary. Nora sent me the statistics. 85 active mentor-mentee pairs across 9 different competitive games. 15 success stories of mentees winning tournaments or joining professional teams. 3 mentees had gotten sponsorship deals. 7 were streaming regularly with growing audiences. The Discord server had over 200 members now, including mentors, mentees, and alumni who stayed involved to help newcomers. We were making measurable impact that showed up in actual results. Girls were competing, winning, building careers in gaming. The numbers proved the program worked beyond just good intentions. Nora called me the next day and said the tournament organization wanted to talk about expansion. They had been contacted by gaming organizations in 6 other countries asking about our model. Everyone wanted to know how we structured the program, how we matched mentors with mentees, how we handled issues that came up. The organization was proposing partnerships to replicate what we built internationally. Nora asked if I was interested in being involved with the expansion. The idea of going global was overwhelming. I built this program for the girls who messaged me after my story went viral. I never imagined it would spread beyond North America. But if it could help more people, if it could create the same kind of support network in other countries, then obviously I wanted to be part of that. I told Nora yes before I could overthink it. 2 months later, I competed in another major championship. I won my 11th title. During the post-match interview, the host asked about my future plans. I announced that I was stepping back from competing full-time to focus on leading the mentorship program. I would still compete occasionally, but my priority was the work that created lasting change instead of just adding more trophies to my collection. The decision felt right. I had proven everything I needed to prove as a competitor. Now it was time to put that energy into building something bigger than my own career. The crowd applauded when I explained what the program did and how it was expanding. Several people came up to me afterward, asking how they could get involved as mentors. 3 months after that, Bate competed in another major championship. I was not competing this time, so I sat in the audience and watched her dominate every match. She had incorporated new techniques we practiced and developed her own style that was different from mine. Her gameplay was aggressive but calculated. She took risks but always had backup plans. She made it through bracket after bracket until she was in the finals again. This time she won, youngest champion in that tournament's entire history. When they announced her victory, she pointed at me in the audience before accepting the trophy. Her gamer tag was still Maya's mouse, the tribute to our mentoring relationship and the equipment Derek destroyed years ago. The commentators mentioned the story during the broadcast, how she was part of the mentorship program, how having support from experienced players changed everything for her. Bates' victory speech happened right there on stage, with thousands of people watching in person and hundreds of thousands streaming online. She talked about how having a mentor who understood the specific challenges made all the difference. She encouraged other experienced players to join the mentorship program because that support mattered more than anyone realized. The message spread across gaming social media within hours. Clips of her speech got shared everywhere. Applications to become mentors tripled overnight. People who never considered mentoring were reaching out asking how they could help. The impact went way beyond just Bates' individual achievement. I watched her lift that trophy and saw the same fierce joy I felt at my first championship, but there was something different about her victory compared to mine. I had to fight alone. I had to prove myself to a community that did not want me there. I had to face harassment and intimidation with nobody backing me up until after I had already won. Bate did not have to do any of that. She competed knowing she had support. She faced that heckler knowing the community would defend her. She built her career knowing there were people who wanted her to succeed. That was the whole point of everything I had been working toward. Not that I survived the harassment and won anyway, but that the next generation did not have to survive it at all because we changed the environment they were competing in. That was what victory actually looked like. 2 months after Bates' championship, the mentorship program hit 100 mentor-mentee pairs. Nora called me on a Tuesday afternoon with the numbers and asked if I was ready to make this official. We spent 3 weeks filing paperwork to establish a formal nonprofit organization. Nora became executive director because she had the organizational skills and I had the public profile. We divided responsibilities based on what each of us did best. The nonprofit status meant we could accept donations and grants to cover travel costs for mentees attending their first tournaments. We could pay for equipment for girls who could not afford decent setups. We could offer scholarships for tournament entry fees. This thing I started by answering messages in my inbox had turned into something sustainable and bigger than any one person. The structure meant it would keep going even if I stepped back someday. I still competed occasionally because walking away completely would feel like letting Derek win in a different way. 14 months after the original incident, I won my 12th championship at a major tournament in Seattle. The victory felt less important than the message it sent every single time I stepped on stage. Speaking up about harassment did not end my career. I was still here, I was still winning. Every trophy proved that telling the truth did not make you weak or ruin your future. The gaming media covered my 12th win, but spent more time talking about the nonprofit and how many girls were competing now who would not have before. That shift in focus was exactly what I wanted. Derek's stream was down to 40 viewers now when I checked it late one night. Most of the chat was bots spamming crypto scams and fake giveaway links. He was playing a different game because he could not compete in his original specialty anymore with the lifetime bans. His viewer count used to be in the thousands back when he had sponsorships and a team. Now it was just him in a dark room talking to almost nobody. Some people tell me it is petty to check his numbers. Maybe it is. But I earned the right to feel satisfied watching consequences play out. Justice does not always happen in situations like mine. When it does, I am allowed to notice. The thing about spaces people say you do not belong in is that you do not just take them for yourself. You hold them open for everyone who comes after you. I watch the next generation compete without the fear I had at their age. They walk into tournament halls knowing there are policies protecting them and mentors supporting them, and a community that will defend them if someone tries what Derek tried. Bate lifts trophies without anyone questioning if she cheated. Haley joins professional teams without anyone asking if she is just there for diversity. New girls register for their first tournaments without shaking hands or tasting blood. That is the best victory I could have asked for. Not revenge, not personal glory, just watching the doors stay open and seeing who walks through them. All right, that is all I